6 o'clock. Meeting's order and we'll start the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. For the roll call, we'll let the record reflect that all members are present. And I will start out with a couple of board chair comments. So one of the coolest things that I like to look at as we're looking through all the stuff is scholarships. So $16,350 in scholarships is what we paid out this last month. So that's awesome. So I just want to say thank you to the local businesses and the organizations and the families that invest in our students for that. Second, donations. So I always like to say thank you for the donations, because when we do it by resolution, it's not as heartfelt as that. So we have over $10,000 in regular donations, and then from the estate of EM Sprinkle, we have another donation that we'll have them talk about a little bit later tonight. And then the work session. I just want to say thanks to those that briefed at the work session and presented. It was a bunch of great conversations, and I think the board together had good conversations as well. And we got to know each other a little bit better with the new board. So I think that was great. And that's what I have for my comments for today. Is there somebody that would like to move the approval of the agenda?
I'll move it.
Director Holm, thank you.
I'll second it.
Director Hackett, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Appreciation, recognition, and presentations.
Chair Hofstad, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Wertkamp Herman, Galen Arnzen, Activities Director. I have 4 awards that I want to recognize, from 2 different categories. The first one I'm going to be recognizing is Royalton's Excel nominees. So Excel stands for Excellence in Community Education and Leadership. So they had to fill out an application that looks at their athletics, fine arts, community service, like within the building or in their school, and then community service outside and how they better their community, and then they're also their school. There's a little bit of a GPA, but not as high of emphasis as our next award we'll talk about. This is also awarded to juniors, and so it's a way to recognize your outstanding juniors. So this year's nominees for the Excel were Coney Bignac and Emily Block. So Cody, you want to come on up? Emily is playing basketball tonight, so she was not able to make it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's kind of cool. I mean, I think the Excel Award's only been around since I think 94 is when they first kind of started it. And so I think we had 300 some applicants that went on to the state to be looked at. So it's a huge feat.
Congratulations.
Next award that we'll be giving out is our AAA nominees. This looks at academics, arts, and athletics. So you're trying to see that balanced, well-rounded student athlete. Each school picks somebody that represents this. Again, this is a senior that they look at. Then each subsection picks who their top one, and then that goes on to the next. So then at the end, they have a representative from each of the different sections for single A and double A, a boy and a girl. So kind of cool feat. Our nominees or winners for our school were Lane Olson and Addison Shanerock, and Addison's playing basketball as well. Picture?
Yeah, let's get a picture. So,
There's maybe last photo.
Yeah.
where's the
You don't want me out of the way. Got it.
All right, recognition of citizens for input purposes. Kathy would like to talk.
Board members and superintendent. I sent an email to you today, board members, and I think I forwarded it to Tony and Christine. I don't know if you had time to read it or not, but if you didn't, please read it. I think there's one person that doesn't know me. I retired from being in the media center last year, and I am really here to encourage you to reinstate that position. I know you don't recommend cuts, but you accept them or approve them. So I would encourage you to relook at this. I have a whole list of things. You know, I never realized the job was important until it was. My sole responsibility was to get kids to like to read. It's different than the classroom. Yeah, they're being covered by classroom teachers going in and I'm scanning the books, you pick out your books. It's kind of a rush. There's not a lot of sitting down and reading. Some of the paras are covering some of the checking in books and shelving them, and that's kind of it. I've been subbing over in both buildings. When I go over there, it's not a pleasing place anymore. There's no bulletin boards. Lots of times the lights are out. You know, kids need to. And granted, it took me a few years to get good at it, and even at the end, there'd be things I'd pick up, but all kids don't necessarily like to read. And if they tell me there's no good books out of the 16,000 or whatever we had, I would find a book that they'd like. You know, what do you like to read? That was one actually during COVID, when you only had a small group. What do you like to read? Let's find this. The parents don't know the system and they don't know to do that. So I feel like we really lost something. Some of the promotions, I've been over there and I've noticed, even like I will check the reports. There's a lot of kids would overdo books. Now, I don't know, and granted, again, at times like after Christmas was always bad, but there's nobody there to keep telling them, well, your book's overdue. I'm going to have to send an email to your parents. Here's a slip for you. Somebody else wants that book, bring it back. It's just, there's all these little household things that are an important part of the job. So, and like I said, it doesn't have to be necessarily full-time. Lots of changes in the last 10 years, but it really needs to be consistent. Somebody there that when a kid wants a book or has a question about something, that there is a person there, set amount of hours to be able to come there and ask them that. So, I would encourage you to talk to the teachers, the kids. I know it's technology. There was little things that I could Google and know how to fix, and now they're not getting done either, and help desk tickets. But I just feel that the kids are missing out on something. And if it was a budget cut, there's still people covering parts of it. It wasn't a big amount of money. And I guess if you felt that it was an important part of that, I'm just disappointed in that. So I am going to the boys' game. So but otherwise, shoot me an email if you have any questions for me. But I would certainly, like I said, encourage you to talk about it and talk with staff and that and see what your thoughts are. So thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Would you guys like to come up and speak? Sure.
Dr. Werkamp, board and staff. My name is Mel Ulrich. The lady that's donating this money to the band and the choir name was Elizabeth Marie Ulrich. And she became Elizabeth Sprinkle after marriage. Liz grew up here in Royalton. We went to the high school that's non-existent now. It's all new over there now. It was just a boxy old building. She was 1 or 2 in the class. I couldn't find the information. They didn't have valedictorian or salutatorian at that time. But she fought hard to be the best. Actually, she fought against my wife's brother, Robert, who later wrote a book and put Elizabeth's name in the book. And I know it was because of Elizabeth. Elizabeth worked her way through college. We didn't have a lot of money. And years ago, there was a hotel in Royalton. It was called Avery's, owned by Red and Lydia Avery. And Liz got a job with writing up the people coming in, cleaning, doing everything she could. When they closed down in Royalton, they went to Bismarck. They took Liz with her to Bismarck, where she worked her way. That's how she worked her way through college. And of course, her grades were high, so she got several grants to make it through. So her first job was out west in Washington, the state of Washington, near Tacoma. And she was in elementary education. It's where she met her husband. There's a air base out there called McCord. And he was a pilot, and he was on his way to Nam. And he flew, I don't know if you're familiar with the Douglas, the old Douglas. They actually kidded around with a gentleman from Royalton that did fly the Douglas C3 or 5, I don't remember which it was, but he was in photography. You've heard of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. He flew a low area photograph for things like that. He got home, they got married. Unfortunately, the marriage didn't last. They were separated about 6 years ago. So. They were pretty wealthy people. Him being a pilot, he flew for Western Airlines, which later became Delta. Started out 1, 2, and then finally a pilot. They invested wisely, and that's one of the reasons they have this money. They didn't have any children, unfortunately. She loved children, and she loved music, listening to it and playing music. She sung in the choir. Her last effort was in Tucson, Arizona, where they retired. And I was down there several times. It's a magnificent country if you like brown. But I didn't particularly care for Arizona because their water's not as good as Minnesota. But that's where she spent her retirement. Liz got sick. She had a stroke about 5 years ago. We went down and kind of convinced her to come home, be with her family. So she got a place in Edina. It's called Brookdale Estates in Edina. And she fell. She had a seizure. We got down. Finally, it was just one thing after another. We got her up here home. And her latest home was Diamond Willow in Little Falls. So that's where she passed away peacefully. And her wish was that young people from Royalton that didn't have, weren't as fortunate as other people, she could help and contribute. And that's why she's donating this money at this time. So I'm proud to be here tonight to share this little bit about my sister. And I look forward to hearing the legacy in the music created by the students who will be helped by her generosity. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. So board committee report, I think we're gonna hear a whole bunch about the budget tonight already. We didn't meet the policy and there's nothing from Midstate. So I think we can go to the superintendent report.
So, just a few things here. It was paraprofessional week, the week of January 20th, so, we appreciate them and got them out certificates. And school counselor week on February 3rd, so thank you so much to Monica for her work she does for us. Also congrats to Brielle Elia and Hunter Shield, for their first and second place in the spelling bee. So we have new winners there. And then just a quick update. So for right now, we don't really have anything new to project with legislation because obviously these committees are still meeting and such. Right now, we know that from last legislation that the inflationary factor has been added to what our general fund would be. That's averaging right now somewhere in the range of 2.3%. It could get as high as 2.7. We won't know that until the February forecast comes out. It has not come out yet. If nothing is done, the unemployment will run out, and therefore they feel for this next year, about 40% of our unemployment, that summer term unemployment cost would be covered by the state, and after that, the other 60% would fall on the general fund, and future years, there would be $0. The governor has put in his budget to address that. But again, that's just one. We have a lot more time and work to go through. And then also, we did look at some calculations. MREA did some calculating across the state on the compensatory. So if compensatory doesn't get fixed or held harmless, they calculated Royalton to have about a $92,000 loss of revenue. And you had a little bit, had it over 100, but somewhere in that range. If they go with the governor's proposal to hold it harmless, we would stand to have a little bit additional coming to us in that particular fund. It's about $8,000 more, according to MREA's calculation at this time. So that's my legislative update.
Any questions? All right, business manager.
Good evening, Board Chair Hofstad, members of the board, Dr. Christine Werkamp Herman, Heidi Hagen, business manager for the district. This is a look at the monthly recap presentation. Enrollment for the month of January was at 918. I do want to make a note that in February, we have seen an uptick in students enrolling, and we're around 925 or so at this time. We've consistently held steady at 918 since the beginning of the school year. We ended last fiscal year with about 907 students, just a daily membership, and we continue to track it monthly forward. I don't know if it's just me, but that's really blurry. But anyways, I know what this says, but if you all can see it or it's in your packet. This is a historical 10-year look back at enrollment trends throughout the district, kindergarten through 12th grade on the far right there. We are looking at the month end of December, again, fiscal year 25, December 2024, general fund revenues. Overall, the adopted budget and comparison to previous fiscal years, a percentage of the overall budget tracking above projected totals, again, based on that overall percentage at about 42%. General fund expense month end December, again, projecting over the percentage of the budget as compared to the prior years at 44%. The next slide, I'll go into detail as to what that looks like. Salaries and wages are on track. As the month end December 2024, benefits are over about 5.5%, specifically due to health insurance increases as a percentage of contracts, work comp, insurance, and unemployment expenses. Purchase services are over budget by about 28%. Part of this has to do with our property insurance being paid in full at the beginning of the fiscal year, as opposed to prior years, we paid it monthly. Long-term facilities maintenance, repairs, and projects were done at the beginning of the fiscal year, whereas prior years, the projects were spanned out across the fiscal year. Again, this is based on the types of projects that are budgeted for. This had specifically to do with recarpeting classrooms, which had to be done in the summer months. Did the relighting of the football stadium. Mid-state special education services costs are increasing, and PSEO costs have increased. Supplies are on track with the budget. Our capital expenses as listed there are on track as we had budgeted. And the other category is over budget, and that's due to reclassifying certain types of fees and the correcting of the codes. That's it. And we'll talk about a budget revision here in a little bit, but if you have any questions now on December's information, take hold.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
First up, on that closeout of 23-24 at our finance meeting, with that overage of 831,000 roughly, where, like, when we adjusted that budget, where did we pull that money from to make up for that?
So the funds aren't being made up, so to speak. It just takes from any restricted funds or unassigned funds or assigned funds. We
Okay.
also recoup some of those expenses that were over budget in revenue that came in, also over budget by about 300 and some thousand.
Okay. All right, I have a couple of questions, sorry. And then the long-term facilities maintenance, like the projects we did. Does that all come out of the, like, we get LTFM dollars, or did we kind of spend past those and then have to go into like the general for those?
No, that all comes out of LTFM funds.
So on that. And just so I'm understanding, maybe I'm not understanding, but like on that budget, we were over by 28%. Was it things that just came up that we didn't budget for at the beginning of the year then?
Can you go back a slide? Are you talking about
Like
the
it says
purchase
that-
services?
Like the 28.2%, yeah, under the
Yeah.
purchase services.
So part of that has to do, we budgeted for property insurance and we budgeted for the LTFM repairs. As a percentage of the budget compared to previous years, we're over because some of those projects and the property insurance was paid over 12 months. And we're comparing the property insurance and the LTFM project expenses over the span of 6 months. And so that's where that variance comes in.
Okay,
As far as mid-state and PSEO, yes, tonight we'll talk about why we're revising the budget due to the increase in those expenses.
okay. So then that was my other two questions, with the mid-state special ed services. Like, so do we get reimbursed for those services, or is that like our co-op, like our fee to belong to the co-op?
So it depends on the type of fees that we're paying. Some of them are a part of our special education reimbursement, some of them are not.
Okay, and then two more, sorry. And then the, the PSEO, when we say we're, kind of, they're costing us more, we actually don't. Like if a kid takes a PSEO class, we don't, like, they get the college gets the funding that we would normally get, so it's not.
No, it depends on the contract, but in Royalton, we receive the state aid for that student.
Okay,
And then we pay the post-secondary institution the cost per credit that student's taking.
okay, so
So the
We just have
net
more.
effect is if a student were to take 15 credits, and I'm just gonna say at $300 a credit, that's what, $4,500. So we receive 7,200 from the state. So the net difference is 7,200 minus 4,500.
Yeah. So it's really not costing the district any more money, we're just not paying that amount that we're paying that college.
It's costing the district more money because we're having to take the funds that we get for that student and pay another organization.
Right, yeah, I understand that part, but it's not like we're having to take our dollars and paying for that student that's going to that college. It would be a state fund. I mean, we're getting the state dollars and then we're paying for that college. So we're not taking our revenue at the school to pay for that extra than what we're getting from the state.
No, it's not on top of what we're getting from
Right,
the state, it's
okay.
what we're getting, but the problem is we still service that student with social work all of the ancillary services the students can still get from us here.
Okay. And then, my last one is like the reclassification of codes. Could you just explain that a little bit more, like what that is?
So we're accountable to code according to the purpose and or the reason for the expense, and some of those other category expenses were originally budgeted in one of the other categories. I'm just reclassifying them, so moving the expense from one of those categories to the other.
Okay.
So it's still an expense, I'm just coding it based on the UFAR's accounting codes.
All right, that's all I have.
Any other questions?
Good questions. All right, thanks, Heidi.
Am I still up there?
Nope, principal report is next.
Here, Hofstad, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Werkamp Herman, Joel Swenson, high school principal. I have 4 short updates. We talked about this at the work session. A little bit, but I wanted to put it out there in my report for the board meeting. I tracked the failing grades of students throughout the semester. And typically we have sat anytime during the middle of the semester somewhere between 8 and 11%, and then end the semester somewhere 4.5 to 5.5% failure rate. This year, we have, in November when I ran it, I actually did the math a couple times just to make sure I hadn't missed anything. We were running at the middle of the semester at about 5%, 5.2, 5.3%, and ended the semester at 3.7%, which meant we had a higher percentage of our students passing their classes, which is a really good thing. It takes the pressure off of summer school, credit recovery, students repeating classes. Those aren't productive uses of time, resources, energy for students and teachers. We want them to be consistently progressing towards graduation. So the further down and the less we have in that category, the better off we are. And so I was happy to announce that at 3.7%, that is a low for us, and we will continue to look at the reasons why. What's happening out there are, the success of intervention programming, identifying students for the supports that they need, cell phone policy, all of those things go into creating that percentage. Of course, we want that to be as close to 0 as we can possibly make it, and we continue to strive to make sure that we get the supports that students need. Next month at the board meeting, I will present the December, January, and February students of the month. Those are made up of senior students, as voted on, nominated and voted on by the high school staff. It can be for outstanding contributions in school, grades, performances in extracurricular activities, leadership, character, community service. All of those things get played into the staff nominates the students, and then they vote on those students the month. I will be presenting. We do them 3 times a year: fall, winter, and spring. I will recognize the winter students of the month for December, January, and February in March. We have student-led conferences and pre-registration coming up here in the next 2 weeks. Student-led conferences at the high school. Conferences are usually attended at a rate between 25 and 35–40% on a normal arena-style conference. At the principals convention that I was just at, we were talking about conferences, and there were schools that were hitting with arena-style conferences 15 to 25%. And so even when I said 25 to 40%, They were asking what we were doing, and then when I told them about our student-led conferences, where overall in the building, we are at 70% attendance at the high school level. And at sometimes in the middle school, over 85% attendance at our student-led conferences. They were asking for how we do it. Wanted to have some more information. They really liked the thought of being able to get more parents into conferences. So we will be having that, and we'll be looking to keep our high school percentage up over 70%. So I encourage parents to make the appointment with their Royal Hour advisor. And take that time. We try to make that a conference that provides some really good information for parents. It's a little different than the traditional grading conference that you would sit down for with your children's teachers. So looking forward to those again this year. And that's about the 7th or 8th year that we've had the student-led conferences, and we have maintained that attendance of over 70% during that time. And then the last thing I have is the honors breakfasts and the Minnesota Honor Society induction ceremonies will be coming up here February 20th and February 25th at the Royalton American Legion, 8:30 a.m. One of my favorite, besides graduation, one of my favorite events of the year is recognizing student academic achievement. It is a joy for me to read the students who make honor roll and to see them stand up and receive their certificate, and their parents are beaming at them, and they're happy about the work that they've put in. That is I really, really enjoy that time, and it's simple and it's quick. The Karma rolls are extremely good. But it is a really good event, and I'm looking forward to that again. And so we'll be doing that again on February 20th and 25th, and inducting our class of Minnesota Honor Society. They are elected in the fall, and we start kind of probationarily getting them going. And then they're formally inducted into the Minnesota Honor Society at our honors breakfast. So, questions?
Is it gonna snow for the honors breakfast?
Yeah, probably. It's gonna be snowing or it'll be 25 below. It's guaranteed.
Great,
All right,
thanks,
thank you.
Chair House, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Werkamp, Tony Newman, elementary principal. We had kindergarten information night last Tuesday in the cafeteria. A lot of good information out. We continue to send out information, emails. We'll do phone calls here as the school year progresses, and getting everybody that we can registered, ready to go for next year. Coming up here for us this month is I Love to Read Month, and we've got different classroom activities going on, some dress up days, some fun stuff to encourage reading. Which will then lead into Dr. Seuss Week as we start March. Coming up here on the 24th, Monday the 24th, the Teacher in Service Day. That is going to be our next live session for letters. So we've got we'll go from 8:30 to 3:30 that day in the elementary school media center for that. So that'll be a full day. Our conferences are the 3rd and the 4th of March, 4 to 7:30. It's Monday, Tuesday, back to back. And we will open up scheduling for conferences here in the next week or so. And we've had great attendance for those. Weather looks cold here the next couple of days. So we're going to try to get the kids out as much as possible. Inside recess is not popular, but sometimes it's just too cold. Some kids cheer that it's inside recess because they just don't like putting all their stuff on. But we'll get through that. So but otherwise, that's all I have. Any questions?
I have one. How many did you have for registration day?
We sent out 84 packets, which is just census wise, we're down about 20-25 packets that we usually send out. We had 31 packets turned in, and I know of 9 to 12 that are, have yet to turn them in, they just couldn't make it. A lot of people are, it's my third kid, it's my fourth
Yeah.
one, we don't need to be there. I know some people just showed up, gave me this packets, and then they jetted out, so. We've got a bunch of those that we know of that are coming, it's just. Like, I didn't put my packet in yet, I don't have the immunizations form, we gotta print it off of my chart, and then I'll turn it in, and then we'll be good to go, so. Those will get rolled in here, so. Oh, and I do wanna mention fifth grade, big month here for fifth grade with, skiing. We finally got snow, we can do some cross-country skiing here in the next couple weeks, Meyer will get them fitted for boots and skis. And they'll be able to go outside and do that, and then, when it warms up, we'll be able to take them ice fishing here, at Fish Trap Lake, and, the Lions Club is kind of coordinating that in connection with the Rice Sportsman's Club, and we'll get them out there. Well, one day for fifth grade, and the sixth graders who missed it last year as fifth graders, they'll be out there as well the next day, so. Okay, all right.
Thanks, Tony.
Good.
All right, so next is the consent agenda approval. So the board is consenting to approve items listed below as presented at one time. At any point, a director can pull an item off the consent agenda for further discussion. So we're looking at approval of the regular board meeting minutes, the approval of the special meeting minutes, which is the work session, claims, accounts, and financials, approval of the resignation termination, and approval of new hires. Anything anybody would like to pull? Somebody would like to move the consent agenda?
Make a motion.
Director Holm, thank you.
Second.
Director Andrews. All right, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right, motion carries. All right, next, we're looking at election of board chair. I talked to Ellie earlier today, and we talked through some of that, so what are your thoughts? I had asked Ellie if she would consider being vice chair, as she's already attending the meetings and already doing some of that stuff. You know, the co-chair is a possible thing, but it would cost money to have lawyers look at or redo the resolution that Anoka had, and put into practice in different things and how things would be split. I'd rather not spend money on that personally. Yeah, so.
And I said that, I do want a little time to think about it, but, I guess my main thing when I first got on the board in January is that none of the 6 board members feel like their opinion or ideas or anything are not important. So I guess that's my thoughts on it. Anyone else?
I just as soon get it resolved. I mean, just. We come to a resolution, I think it'd be good for this body just to have it resolved, so. That's the way I feel.
I think there's merit in the fact that, different leadership is also brings a lot of asset to the table. You know, you've done it for 2 years and you've done an incredible job. So it doesn't go up to that, but,
Thank you. I appreciate it.
just different leadership, different giftings, different skill sets. You know, changeover is sometimes a good thing. So that's kind of where my vote lies in wanting to see something like that.
That's another thing that we talked about was, you know, there's a lot of things that Ellie's brought up that we hadn't seen ourselves necessarily from that perspective. So it's been really good, at least to bring it out, and then we can talk about it as a board. and then understand like, hey, this is what the board wants to do, so that's what we'll do, so. So I agree with that, too.
Yeah, I would agree with Maria. I mean, a lot of school boards kind of rotate the board chair every year, right? So every year there's a new board chair.
Mhm.
Obviously, we haven't done that. There wasn't anybody that showed any interest in doing it prior to you doing it. And I would agree with Maria that you did a good job. I've told you that personally. But, you know, it's hard to be a board chair, much less be a board chair 2 years in a row. Right? There's just a lot of extra stuff to do. That being said, when we've got somebody else that wants to do it, has the experience of being on the board, understand school board stuff, right? I would kind of agree with Maria that change isn't always bad. What you did was good. I'm not saying what you did was
Yeah.
bad, right?
No.
I told you that personally.
Yeah, I don't take it as a
Right.
personal thing at all. One of the things I did talk to her about also is that, you know, I spent a whole lot of time, I mean, the board made the decision of what we were gonna set goals for and stuff like that, and I spent a whole lot of time doing the effectiveness and, measures of effectiveness and the different standards that we did. I'd really like to see that through. So I don't plan on going more than 3 years as a board chair, but I would like to see that through. But like, it's still a board decision, so.
Right. But I think you could still be involved with that, right? I mean, or you want to kind of go the way you want to see it progress?
I want to see how, after making those changes and the tweaks that we made and the wording that we used, to see how it comes out, like if that was an effective way to communicate and do that, if that makes sense.
But you could still be involved without being the chair, right?
Mhm.
With that. Okay. I'm open to co-chairs. I mean, other districts do it. I get it. Would there be something maybe that the attorney would have to do? Probably would have to see kind of how that is. And then just getting rid of the vice chair. I'm totally fine with that as well.
Do we know what kind of costs are associated with that, or have we explored that at all?
No.
I did not reach out to the attorney. I did reach out to a local superintendent and talk with him, so I know what they did. Their attorney reviewed it. They have internal counsel. External counsel review that.
They get rid of their vice chair then? Correct. Yeah.
And this is the second year they're doing that.
The board meeting, I watched the board meeting, they said it's worked really well.
I think they go every other time though.
Yes, every other board meeting, right? But during the election, they said it worked really well. I mean, it was unanimous. Do it again.
Could we explore that? Because I feel like we're kind of stuck here at this point. And we're having great conversations, but I agree. I think we need a resolution. We are here to support the kids, and I think the sooner we can come to something, the better we'll all serve them. So maybe we could explore that and see what that looks like for a cost.
Me and Ryan did talk today too, that I don't feel like where we're stuck is getting in the way of any decisions. And I want to be sure staff knows that too, because I think they've been told a couple times that we can't even make a decision on a chair, and I don't think that's necessarily an issue. I don't think we're not gonna get things done or avoid, you know what I mean, avoid things.
I
And
don't
I don't think.
I don't
anyone's
think, I
feeling
mean,
like-
we're not sitting here arguing for hours on
No.
end, so it's just a thing, you know?
Right.
See, some of the asset to having co-chairs would be, she's able to glean your wisdom from 2 years of serving. She's also then able to be raised up into the position better than having to stumble and fall and do all the extra work that you have to do behind the scenes.
Yep, well, and that's part of what we talked about too, is going through all the processes, since a lot of them have changed over the last 2 years.
And splitting the responsibilities, so it's not so overwhelming for one person to commit to. I mean, I think these are some assets that I think co-chairs would bring to the table. I mean, there's just a lot to carry for a board chair for responsibilities. You know, it's like a full-time job.
Oh, there's.
And it wouldn't be half bad to split some of that and where your giftings are, you know what I'm saying? Like, so that you don't have to carry the whole load and
Yeah.
Maybe you guys would compliment in that manner. And
I think we could do
wouldn't,
that
so.
same thing as chair, co-chair too. We could split some responsibilities. I'd be more than okay with that.
I guess, yeah, we'll have to look into the cost. I can't see it being a huge thing, but I don't know what they have to draft up. I talked to two of the school board members in Anoka, and I guess they weren't real specific on what they had to draft up as far as how did they.
I think that gives us a starting point, and if it's a cost we're not comfortable with, then we have to figure it out.
Right.
At least we know.
And like I said, I don't feel like it's getting in the way of any decisions or it's, I mean, as far as, yeah, that goes, but I guess that's just how I feel.
So we want to table those two and check out the cost and come back. See a lot of head nods.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll go to 10C, approval of the revised budget.
Hosted, members of the board, Dr. Christine Werkamp Herman. Tonight I'm going to share with you two budget revisions for fiscal year 25. One with what we had originally budgeted, excuse me, 910 students. And then also what I feel is a more accurate representation would be a revised budget to consider and that I recommend, which would be the 918 students that we've had consistently since the beginning of the school year. And also knowing that we've since increased up to about 925 students. I feel that's a conservative approach, given where we're at currently year to date. So if we're looking at the budget recommendation that I am proposing would be an adopted general fund revenue of, and I'm gonna have to get my computer. And I don't memorize it. A little bit to load. So back to the budget for 918 students in the general fund would be just under 12,200,000, just over $12,269,000, which is an increase from the 11,467,000. The increase has to do with the increased enrollment, as well as an increase in special education revenue funds. And then the expenditures, again, there's two different category or sections of expenditures. They're all the same expenses. They're just broken out into object series and program series. After I talk a little bit more about the recommended budget revision, I'll bring up, I received 2 emails requesting some answers and or some explanation to those different categories. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the overall budget that I recommend for expenditures would be about $12,202,000, which would be an increase from the $11,600,000. And that has to do primarily with areas in benefits, which an increase in health insurance, increase in unemployment, in the benefits, an increase in the purchase services due to mid-state PSCO and some slight decreases in supplies based on current needs of the departments, increase in equipment based on the LTFM project being finalized in fiscal year 24. That was slated for the end of fiscal year 24. And then the other expenditures category, which accounts for the indirect chargeback from the food service fund. So overall, that would leave about $67,000 of revenue exceeding expenditures based on this budget
on silent.
revision.
As of I,
Whereas we bring up the 910 budget revision. Again, that's taking into account what we had originally budgeted, again, being more conservative at the time of the original budget because we didn't know what enrollment would look like come the fall, at the start of the school year. We would have expenses exceeding revenues based on the addition of student fund activities, which was a component that was inadvertently left out when we were in the finance committee. So again, as I mentioned, I feel like 918 is a very consistent, still conservative approach. Certainly represents the current status of the school district right now and would be what I would consider and recommend to the board. By doing so, the fund balance unassigned would be just under 16% as projected with this budget recommendation at 918. Any questions on the budget before I go into some of the questions that I received in email Friday and over the weekend, which I was thankful for so that I could compile the information for tonight's meeting.
The change in enrollment number that you're suggesting to the 918, that is just a commitment to June 30th this year, correct? Or is this for the whole next year?
No, this is just for this school
Till
year.
this.
Yes, and
summer,
we'll start,
so
we already have started working on next year's budgeted enrollment and considerations for staffing based on some assumptions that we'll have to consider given the legislation is still meeting.
So we've budgeted under and we essentially lost those funds from the students that are over the 910 or? we still
No,
receive
so
that?
we,
What's the gain or loss with correcting this number is what I'm wondering. Like,
so we don't gain or lose any funding per se. MDE requires that the board approve a budget by June 30th of every year, which at that time we have to give a best estimate of what we think enrollment's going to be. We ended at 907. We felt 910 was a conservative yet realistic number. That's what MDE budgets and meters our funds off of throughout the year. At the end of the fiscal year, more towards November, when audits are due and finalized, the actual student enrollment is finalized, and then we receive the funding in addition to more or less. So if we have less students than what we've budgeted, we would receive less funding. If we have more, we would receive more funding.
I see.
So we don't lose or gain any, it's just based on final numbers. And so MDE has to pay, doesn't have to, budgets and meters funds based on what we estimate our enrollment to be.
So we adjust this now, we get those funds for them 8 pupils now, or we would get them next
No.
year, or?
We'll get them at the end of the fiscal year and closer towards audit being finalized, we then would create what I would call receivable, and I'm explaining this in my terms, which is a challenge for me to explain it in layman's terms, but we would account for that revenue and then we receive it subsequent to the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
I don't know how else to explain.
So can I comment?
Yes,
You done? Okay, so been on the board for a while. I'm not conservative. I can't be in my business. I don't understand why we're always so conservative until the year that we lost a lot more students in the spring than we thought we were gonna lose. And then, so then the next year when MDE comes in, all of a sudden they're taking out instead of adding a little bit. And that's a real problem because it's not like you have a lot of money in next year's budget either. So
Right.
I would be comfortable with the 918 because we've been booking 918 for 7 months now. So we probably should do some education on ADM. For board, just remind us how ADM is calculated. At some point, we should do that because ADM is calculated, it's not just a one number, it's every day, you know, so if you got the students for 7 months, we're getting better. We kind of pretty much know what the last 7 months are, so we historically lose some students in the spring. It's been not every spring, though, because we've gained some sometimes, so, but I'd be comfortable at 918, so.
I guess I'm gonna be completely opposite of you.
Right.
Because in both my business and Travis's, we run completely opposite, you know, like very conservative because of what the next year may bring. So when I look at it, like our closeout, when, you know, we had a little bit of overage on things and not knowing what the legislation is gonna do with the, unemployment and all that. I would feel more comfortable staying at 910, but I guess that's just my thoughts. But like I said, in
Amazing,
my business,
amazing.
it's completely
Yep.
different, I guess. I just would rather be conservative and like when we look at next year's budgeting, be able to do less with taking anything away from what we have going on rather than like being above and then having to take things.
And we have to understand that it's Heidi's job to be right.
Correct.
Which when it's a moving target is tough, I get it, so. Yeah, I guess that's what I'd rather be than conservative or out there is to be right, but that's tough, so.
Right. But I do understand that school finance is much different than
I agree,
most.
I agree completely.
and 918, Randy, you had mentioned this just about the concept of ADMs is an average daily membership over the 169 days that students are here in seats based on attendance and the reporting that we do in our MARS student information system and report to the state. So over the last 7 months, we have been at least at 918 and in some cases 919, 920, depending on what the 925 and or less or more over the next couple months leans me to feel confident in budgeting at the 918.
I have a question on the expenditures there. The two big ones that pop out at me would be the employee benefits one, and then the purchase services, right? That's a huge jump. So we adopted a budget for the benefits at 1,964,000, going back at 2,161,000. Why is that? Do we not know what our benefits cost us at the beginning of the year? Do we not know? Obviously, if you have more employees, but benefits go up, do we hire more employees that cause it to go up, or why is there such a big gap?
Those are very good questions. I'll answer them and then if now would make sense to go into some of those email questions that I
Sure.
received. We'll add into addition to your questions. So benefits, to some extent, yes, we know what our taxes are going to be based on the percentage federal and state. We know what retirement, pension, 403B, our pension, PERA, TRA, we know what that percentages are. So I use that based on what salaries and wages are. What we don't know is health insurance because we renew in January. And so July through December, we have 6 months of knowing what that health insurance premium is going to be. And then in January, it changes and we have some contracts that are tied to a percentage. So the increase in benefits is the large increase, 35–40% that we had in our premiums jump in January accounts for the next 6 months. Plus unemployment is in benefits. So we had a very large increase in the summer months unemployment benefits, which we estimate the best we can to determine what that amount would be back in May and June when the budget was approved, but now we know what actuals are. So those are two large components of the increase in the benefits. As far as purchase services, the changes there are mid-state, so the increase in special education services, the increase in students participating in PSEO, 35–40% increase in property insurance, which at the time we budgeted, we didn't have the exact renewal back by that time. And so those three components are a large part of the increase in purchase services.
Said 30–40% increase in property insurance.
Correct.
Do we shop around for that? I mean, because we had our own homeowners insurance came back about that high last year. And I called them and said, we better figure something out, and they got it back down to where it was. So I don't know if we're doing that. Obviously, I can assume we probably are, because.
It's a consideration that Dr. Werkamp and I have discussed and likely something that we will want to do for next year's renewal.
Sure.
I've been a part of that in other districts, and depending on the proposals that we receive and the difference in agents versus brokers and the nuances of statutes regarding school property insurance, there's a lot of variables, but yes, it could be a consideration. At least something to go out for proposal to see what options we have.
I have a question for John and Ellie. So you haven't been on the board the last couple of years or whatever, but do you understand when they're talking about the unemployment? You guys know the change in what happened?
I do not.
Can somebody
Yeah,
more fluent than me
Yeah.
explain that?
So in the legislation 2 years ago, they approved summer term unemployment. So now bus drivers, paraprofessionals, any hourly staff that doesn't work in the summer can apply for unemployment. However, you can't levy for that like you do your other unemployment. So they then put together several $1 million to offset these costs, but it was just for until the money runs out. That money is set to run out. That's what I was talking about for next year. It would cover about 40% of our estimated unemployment costs. Those unemployment costs keep going up. Not only is it because more people took it or, applied for it, but also when their wages go up each year, then your unemployment dollars go up as well. So that's what I talk about with all the school districts telling the legislature, you have to find a funding stream for that.
So, right, like the last 2 years, is that then covered by that pot of money?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yep.
Okay, so then when we talk about that being an extra purchase service, that really wasn't. We're just looking forward that that's going to be an extra service, like a purchase.
It's still an
service?
expense, but we're also accounting for the revenue on the revenue side. So that's expenses up in the top part in the revenue.
Yeah, what we originally estimated it to be, it came in higher than the original budgets, what we estimated, so that's why we're not.
It's money in, money out, but it still makes the number bigger.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I understand that, but if it's being covered right now. Then it's money in and it's money out, but if it's equal,
Well,
right?
But so
but
she
it
raised.
still shows
yeah,
up on
in the
there
revenue.
as an increase,
Yeah.
so there's. Sometimes we forget, everybody doesn't know what's going on, and I have to think, and I wonder if you guys know that was a change in legislation, so.
Yeah, we talk.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, we talk.
I can go further into talking a little bit more about those different expenditure categories. Now would be a good time. Do you want to pull up email request 1? So the questions or the asks, if you will, have to do with explaining the expenditures that are listed under purchase services, explaining the expenditures that are listed under other expenditures, explaining what expenditures are listed under site administration, under support services, instructional support, pupil support, and other finance. You can scroll down just a little bit. So they're the same total of expenses, but expenses by object series are recorded and coded differently than expenses by program series. And it's just how they compartmentalize them out. So under purchase services based on object codes, you'll have the business manager, Cobra administration, asset management, inventory tracking. That's our frontline program, absent and time management software. Actuarial requirements for GASB 75, which is our other post-employment benefits requirements, Region 1, and our smart vendor support, property risk management. Skyward, WEX is our dependent care and healthcare savings administration. RevTrack allows us to take online payments, background checks, Ellers, and will now be PMA. Supports all of our dissemination, bonding requirements, property insurance, PSEO, facility repairs and maintenance, utilities, Midstate auditor, Northern Pines, our communication and internet, our staff professional development expenses. Keep scrolling down. Student travel and registration, unemployment's in there, and our printer copier fleet leases are under purchase services by object. And the other expenses categories, any dues, memberships and license fees, food service, indirect chargeback is coded there. Resource training and solutions memberships, our Skyward annual license, Parchment services, transportation software, Transversa, board book, the Minnesota State High School League head coaches dues, and memberships and related affiliations, MSBA, MRA, MASA. So that's by object. Now we have all of those same exact expenses and all of the same amounts, but it's based on the program, not necessarily the object. So further identifying what's included under site administration, that's middle and high school principal, elementary principal, 60% because 40% is coded to another program series based on the READ Act. Assistant principal, 50% because a portion of that salary is coded under another program, and the head clerical or head secretaries in each of the high school, middle school, and elementary offices. So then we have support services. This program has the district office staff, so HR is 50% because the other 50% is coded to Community Ed Fund 4. Our accounts payable, receivable, and payroll clerk, and 50% of the district office secretary because the other 50% is coded to Fund 4. Under district support services are all the fees for service based on the program. So business manager and all of the ones that I had listed earlier are listed there as well. Read it verbatim, but it's similar to the object code for fees for service, purchase services. You can scroll down. Instructional support. So this is a program that where we code our elementary principal for the READ Act mandate, media center, professional development, technology staff, hardware, software, curriculum licenses, and devices. Pupil support has is where we would code our nurses, our social workers, our school counselors, all of our transportation, salary, benefits, fuel, buses, vans, and then Northern Pines support services. And then all other financing uses are property insurance, work comp insurance, and student scholarship. That's all based on program code. So then here, I feel like I'm doing a UFARS 101 training. But object series are based on different categories, resulting in all of the object codes that are in the 100s, salaries, 200s are benefits, 300s are purchase services, 400s are supplies, 500s capital, and 800s other. And then if you're looking by program, it's based on all of the different departments, I guess, if you will. So 050 is site administration, 010, 020 is district admin and board. Forgot to put board in there, but 010 is board. The 100 series is all support services. The 200 program series is all regular instruction. 300 is CTE, 400 is special ed. 600 is instructional support, 700 is pupil support, 800 is facilities, 900 are 500 other financing. So then I just put an example of a few codes. So a UFARS code is a 16-digit code, whether expense or revenue, and it tells a story. So your first segment is fund. What fund is it? 01 is your general fund, 02 food service, 4 is community ed, 7 is debt service, etc. The next segment is your organization. That tells you where. The next segment, the 110, is the program, so that would be who. The next segment is a course, which is district specific. If we wanted to track something specific, we would use a course code. The next segment is finance code. That's all relative and related to if we have restricted funds, we would have finance code, and then the very end is what type of expense is the object. And so there's just some examples there of what that 16-digit UFARS code tells us. So someone can give me, and ask me, where would you code legal fees? And I would rattle off the code.
Can you put that up just move it up a little bit? So the code above goes with that.
Yeah.
You want to talk through that just once so they see.
So
like,
the first
whole
code there is E01, 005, 110, 00, 401. So it's telling us it's Fund 1, General Fund. The organization 005 is district-wide. The program is support services. The course, there's nothing, finance, nothing. Object it's a supply code, non-instructional supply code. Next one is, again, it's an expense. It's Fund 1, 005, so it's district-wide. 010 tells us it's the board program, nothing course finance related, and it's a 305 object fee, which means it's a fee for service. And then the next one is just an example of Fund 1 again. This time the organization 010, which is elementary. The program is site administration, which is 050, no course, no finance. And it's telling us it's a salary because it's in the 100 object series 110. And I love my job. This is one of the reasons why, because it's exact. This is the code you use and this is where it goes from.
Can I ask a question? If we scroll all the way up to the top again? I don't know if I missed it, but in the, yep, keep scrolling down, sorry. So like where so these, like the services, I didn't catch where the superintendent falls.
So we don't pay, we pay a superintendent under the superintendent program code, and they're an employee of the district, so we wouldn't pay them under purchase services. We'd pay them under salaries.
Okay, so like where the high school and elementary principal were, like on that.
And it might make sense if
So
then
like
I go
the
to your
site, yeah.
email and
Yeah.
kind of go
We'll
over
to
that.
it. Should we do that
okay.
quick? Let's go to that email.
So then the email request number 2. So then here, what positions are coded to site admin and district admin? What expenses are coded to support services? And what caused the large increase? And then what are the dollars being spent on the last 5 to 6 years in these categories? So now we're looking at program series. This is where the expenses are being driven from. So site administration, that's our principals, assistant principal, head secretaries in each of those offices. Whereas district administration includes the board, the superintendent, the administrative assistant to the superintendent, legal fees, publishing fees, subscription. So that answers the question as where the superintendent is quoted. Support services, that's the district office. And included in there are fees for service, and the large increase is due to unemployment. You can scroll down, I think that's about it. Oh, and then here's, it asked for salaries over the last 5 to 6 years. So site admin, you can see there from left to right, fiscal year 20 through fiscal year 25, and this would be the revised budget recommendation of 918 students. But over the course of the years, you can see the amounts changing. I made a note there on site admin in fiscal year 23, the large increase had to do with the principal retiring and having severance payout. A district admin, you can see there over the course of the years, the change in total salary amounts under that program series. The admin assistant was not 100% coded in fiscal years FY 20 to FY 24, whereas now coded there.
It was spread across different.
Yeah, it was
programs.
spread
You just
across
put it
3 or
on
4 different programs, whereas I code it to one for the purpose of allocating that job and that role under district administration. And then support services, you can see fiscal year 20 through 25 and the changes there. The business manager expense was coded to fees for services starting in fiscal year 22 for the second half. That's when school management services partnered with the district, so the second half of fiscal year 22, and then going forward. So you can see the change in expenses there.
Thank you.
Any other question?
And I'll email you these 2 documents too, because we didn't get these done until this afternoon about 4 o'clock.
I'm just gonna try writing them this time.
Yeah, no.
It's just a lot of different
I'll definitely
research
email those out to
in
you.
different areas. So any further questions on the 2 budgets that I shared, the recommendation approving the revised budget at 918? Questions on the additional research and information that I provided?
No, thank you for the education though.
Yes, thank you.
That was great.
There's a UFARS manual with hundreds of pages if you ever need reading material.
I think that was actually my favorite class when I was doing Alvin's.
I love it.
Yeah, I want a refund. My grad class. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, somebody want to make a motion?
For what? The 910, the 918, the.
That's why I leave it open.
I'll make a motion to stick with the 910 budget.
By Director Holm. Is there a second? Second. So assuming I can entertain a motion for 918.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, 918.
Director Hackle. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Thank you. Director Andrews. Discussion.
Yeah, so I'll talk about this. When we see the 918 on the revenue side, right, it comes out to 12,269,000. That's fine, as long as we stick there, especially on the expenditure side, because we're at 12,202. So to me, that looks good, right? Expenditures are less than the revenue, which is what we're looking for, right? How do we keep it there? That's my thing. How do we keep the revenues higher than the expenditures? That's our goal, right? At any business, that's the goal. And I'm okay with that. If we can keep it there, you know what I mean? Because you look at the 9-10. That looks like we're obviously budgeting the deficit, right? By $134,000, if I can do that correctly.
That was the original budget,
Right,
the adopted budget.
right. No,
The revised one, I think, what's that? Can you show the revised budget with the 9-10?
$44,000.
so that's where I'm at.
So that shows a 44,000 deficit versus a $60,000.
That's my whole thing is if we know those numbers are strong, like you're saying 918 is where we're at, but you're thinking, why were you thinking 925? Or somebody said 925.
That's where we're at currently.
That's where we're at currently.
So
Like, you'd
918
never
Right.
make up 7 students when,
No.
you know,
Yep, I get that. So in my opinion, the 918 is conservative. It's not as conservative as 910, right? And I'm just trying to see if that's where we're at. 918 is still conservative from where we're at right this second, right? Because we're at 925.
Right.
Is that?
As of.
Okay.
Like you say, that can change again in March.
Yep.
Go back down.
Oh, I know.
Right. I think you raised a really good question, like, how do we make sure? And I think that's what Heidi and I are really, now we have a really nice document that Todd created from SMS that we meet every month and look through all of those things all the time and make sure that nobody's overspending anywhere in their budgets. And then, of course, there's always those things we can't control, sub costs. I have it on that long-term financial plan I sent you all, there's a space there for the uncontrollable costs.
And that's
Utilities.
primarily where, at the end of a fiscal year, when budgets come in over or under, it's the uncontrollable. We can track supply spending, we can track, we know what our salaries are based on contracts. What we have no control over is our sub costs, our utilities, our special education services, property insurance, which we already know, but when we originally budgeted, we didn't have control over that. Same with enrollment. We have no control over whether or not we stay at 918 or go back to 907 or go up to 935. So this is a budget. It's a resource. It's a tool that we use to manage and monitor spending going forward, with the intent and the awareness that this is what we would expect our year-end results.
May I ask one more question? On that, like, well, how you have it, like the 918 and the 910. So say we were, say we were to do the 910 and we ended with butts and seats at 925, you still get that funding. I mean,
Correct.
so, yeah, okay, so, I mean, it's making it look like the outcome of it isn't as good if you stay at the 910, but if you stayed at the 910 and you still had the 925, you'd still make up for that revenue.
Yeah, we won't lose that.
Yeah,
Correct.
that's right.
I think the difference is though, is as we're talking about this each month, as we're at 910, we're not, the expenditures are gonna become much, much bigger because the revenue isn't keeping up with it because we're not pulling in that. We're pulling in 910 revenue rather than 918 revenue or whatever.
They would still make up for that,
At the very end. Yep.
right?
Yep.
So if you stayed conservative at 910, you would just get more money at the end that would then, it's still revenue. Okay.
So is the goal to try and be as accurate as we can? Is that the point of going to the 918? Because then you keep the more accurate as you're looking at it month over month.
Data here.
Got it.
MDE only funds in the current fiscal year 90% of our total state aid. The other 10% comes in after fiscal year and once our audit is final. Because that's when enrollment becomes final.
Because otherwise somebody else might be able to understand it.
I have a question on like just trends and patterns. For me, it comes as a surprise every year when we want to do this revised budget that we now all of a sudden need $600,000 more to get us to June. I mean, it's a little bit different than how I budget my checkbook. A little bit different numbers. So is this just a standard trend and pattern of how the school budgetary system works? Because each year when we come to this revised budget scenario, I'm like sticker shocked at how are we so far off? We just had to,
Speaking of revenues or expense or
well, how both are increasing to such a radical degree in my mind, because I don't work with these kinds of numbers.
so, to answer your question, thank you, very good question, all very relevant and relative to what we're talking about tonight, but so for revenue, the biggest increase in the state revenue was about 500,000 in special education funding. Special education funding looks back at 3, sometimes more year data as special education expenditures are finalized. And that number changes from the time we originally set a budget to revision to next month to June to next September.
Can I jump in on that a minute? So
It just
basically, when we were putting that budget together, the original budget, you look in at MD's reports on what our spend money is, they give us a number. When we went back and to do the revise, go back and look at that number, it had increased by $500,000. Because by the time they do all of their stuff, and it's like a 2 to 3 year look back, then they're like, oh, your expenses went up, so, oh, we pay you this money now. That's what also so hard about SPED is because you bill it, right? You spend it and then you get the revenue later. You don't 2 years, to 3 years later. So it's really a challenge and every single district, to my knowledge, because is experiencing increasing special education costs, significant. So that's where sometimes that revenue can all of a sudden be up and then you're tracking these expenses and all of a sudden, just like with PSEO, we try to know who's gonna take what, but we tell those registrations come in.
So that's the largest increase in the overall revenue between the original adopted budget and recommended revision. As far as revised budget expenditure wise, salaries are relatively similar. We talked about the employee benefits. We don't know what our health insurance premium renewals are going to be. In this case, they are almost 40%. And that impacts the expenditures when contracts are a percentage of that benefit. Again, unemployment, we didn't know how many would apply for and receive the benefit. Work comp is in there. We didn't have our final work comp renewal until June. Due in July, so those expenditures fluctuate, again, uncontrolled expenditures. Purchase services, depending on the needs of the students and the services that they are receiving through Midstate, those expenditures fluctuate. And again, property insurance was included in there. So the controllables we can control, salaries and wages. You can see there's a little adjustment there. We have subs in there, so that's the most
That's a
variable.
volatile one, that we don't know, we never know.
Supplies, we sit down way before the original budget is even approved and work with the departments and the department heads, and we set what the supply budgets are going to be. Capital, have financial long-term plans where we set our capital and equipment budgets. So those are within our control. There's large dollar expenses that are outside of our control that we do our best to budget for based on all the different tools, resources, historical trend data, what's going on currently, where we're sitting as a district to best guess what that expense is gonna be.
Like property insurance has gone up quite a bit. Well as the employee benefit side, so the medical benefit side of it. Is there anything we can do there? I mean, we know that teachers have reached out and said, hey, our benefits are crazy high. Does the school board do anything about that? Does the school do anything about that? I mean, is it across the board that all school districts are going up that much?
No, some haven't. It depends. What we've run into is our claims have been so high. And that when we went out to bid and they looked at that, because insurance committee is the one that actually had, and it was the claims. Some districts have gone up like that, but not all.
So health insurance is like car insurance, so if we have claims.
Yes, correct. And some, yeah.
And
the bigger-
some of the past practices of the board haven't been good for that either. Because we were doing a cash and lieu program, which got our participation number down
Yeah,
so
that's
low. So now you have a claim and you have low participation.
right.
Now you gotta spread that claim on even less, you know, so we've really tried the last couple cycles to try to get rid of that cash and lieu, so try to get them to, you know, to spread that out, because we end up paying for it, you know, so. It's,
Right, the more in the plan, the better the plan.
right,
is.
right, so
We're running like 50%.
we're probably better
Or
than
it's lower than 50%.
30 we were at
We're less,
7-8 years ago, so.
well, we're less than 50, so that's.
Mhm.
Property insurance. I would recommend we consider going out for proposal to see what other agents or brokers may be able to.
Is there Minnesota have minimums for what you have to have for property insurance, like as a
Coverages?
yeah. Deductible wise, or
No, not that I know of. Statutorily anyways, specific to public school districts.
But I do know that many districts right now, because of all this hail and all of this business that we've had, some districts have had their, wind hail, but when you pay your deductible so high that it's almost like you can just replace the roof yourself. And others, there's been a couple of districts, I think in southeastern Minnesota, that can get coverage. People don't want to come to school in their buildings, so it's
there's a lot
rough
of
time
insurance
out.
companies wrote off the state in the last couple of years, so.
Any other discussion? All right, so we have a motion and a second for the 918 by Director Hackett, second by Director Andrews. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Okay.
Abstained? Motion carries. Next one is approval of boys golf team co-op.
Board Superintendent Dr. Werkamp Herman, Kaylin Arnzen, Activities Director. I had Upsala reach out to me. They have a handful of that are interested in joining our team. It looks like it'd be maybe 5-ish. They're unsure what the junior high numbers would be. I've discussed it with our coach, looked at kind of where our roster is sitting, talked to Christine about it and Principal Swenson. We didn't feel like it would affect our students' playing time or golf, things like that. And it would provide an opportunity to give kids another chance to get in the sport. We would do a cost sharing with Upsala, so they, based off of their participation, that there would be some things to get back in that. Questions?
Will we increase as we grow in here, the amount of meets that the students get to work? I mean, like that we book Or whatever
Yeah.
it's scheduled?
Yes, so I know last year I booked at least a couple more than what was the previous year. So as we kind of get established, we kind of get invited to different invites and stuff like that. Last year, we were able to actually host our own conference meet, which was nice for our kids. So that would be as we continue to find more and more meets that work with our schedule.
Have we solidified a home course?
That is still in limbo. I met with actually Little Falls ED and their golf coach with our boys coach and myself. In that meeting, we tried to come up to some form of agreement to share the course. Didn't really get where we wanted. The other side of it is the last that I was aware, Little Falls did not have a course manager. So at this time, like, I don't even have a contact to reach out to about even trying to schedule our meetings and stuff like that. So there are some things that we are working on. We have our multi-purpose space that we're gonna utilize for our lower level kids, so they can get some action on, you know, as like a modified driving range type thing. Just so they can get experience without having to drive to a golf course. Obviously, that's not gonna work well for our higher level kids, just because they're going to be hitting it into the trees or wherever. So we are working on that. Last year, we utilized Oak Hill Golf Course on days that Little Falls had league. We utilized them a couple other times just to get on the course a little bit sooner. And our boys team did go up to Eagles Landing to get on the driving range a little bit easier than trying to deal with Little Falls. So.
Have you looked into maybe just seeing if one of those two courses would take us as their home course? I know it's further to drive. But
Oak Hill is not ideal just because they don't have a driving range. I mean, that would probably be the best option just because they're the closest, minus having to cross Highway 10 is a little scary. I don't see I would have to approach Eagles Landing, but it's a long drive, and to have kids drive that far for practice is asking a lot. So it's kind of a work in progress that I'm continuing to monitor.
No, golf course in Upsala, is there?
I don't believe so.
no, there's not.
What about,
I don't know, so I'd ask.
what about Piers? They just added their second 9. Does that
So-
open this summer?
I had kind of talked to them briefly about it. I'd have to reach back. I mean, the issue that we're running in with Little Falls is that they have a large boys program. And I believe Pierce has a pretty healthy boys and girls program. So that's where the issue is coming from, is just finding enough space for everybody to cohabitate. No, I've thought about, you know, the other surrounding-ish type golf courses, and it's just, they're starting to get a little bit too far out there to ask kids to drive or be shuttled up there and back for practice and stuff. Any other questions about golf or the proposal? Just, we'd be going under just as Royalton High School. It would not be Royalton Upsala as of yet. You know, we maybe would change that at some point, but at least as of right now, it would just be Royalton colors, so.
How many kids are they looking at bringing on?
So these for confirmed, it looks like if you scroll down just a little bit,
Oh, there we go.
2 freshmen, 1 10th grader, and 2 juniors.
It's a year-to-year contract.
So it's a 2-year for sure.
And what's the capacity of our coach? Like how many kids can?
So we have a head coach, and then we have, in a sense, 2 assistants that kind of float back and forth between the boys and girls program.
Girls' participation has been very low.
What you're asking, John, is how many kids they can handle.
Yeah, just like if they all have these numbers spiked and the kids get
Yeah.
excited, want to come over and start doing it.
I mean, that is something that we would just have to evaluate.
Sure.
You know, if we can just evaluate to see what ends up happening. And those numbers are based off of last year's numbers for golf. And as you can see, we had a high number of seniors last year. So that was last year's seniors. So the 11th graders up there would be this year's seniors.
Okay.
Was your recommendation to do this?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to approve the boys golf
team co-op.
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Holm. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Off to basketball I go.
All right, and then donations by resolution. Somebody want to introduce the resolution for acceptance of gifts? Director Trout, thank you. All right, the Fireman's Fund has generously donated $1,300 to the Royalton School District to be used towards girls softball. Fireman's Fund has generously donated $8,000 to the Royalton School District to be used towards the band program. The Bolas Firemen's Relief Association generously donated $500 to be used for the Spanish Club trip to Spain. Emily Runquist generously donated $271.08 to be used for robotics. And the estate of E.M. Sprinkle that we heard from earlier has generously donated $105,279.24 to be used for the Royalton School District Music and Scholarship Program. So be it resolved by the Royalton School Board to gratefully accept the gifts. The motion for adoption of the foregoing resolution was seconded by member
I'll second.
Holm. Thank you. Upon a roll call vote being taken, clerk, can you call the roll?
I'll look up the names so I get them all right. Officer Trout,
Aye.
Officer Holm,
Aye.
Officer Boyd,
Aye.
Officer Hackett,
Aye.
Officer Brian,
Aye.
Austin,
And you have to
You guys
say
ask
yourself.
and
yourself.
myself. So I say, Officer Andrews, aye. I'll get it.
All right. And no one voted against.
Like, this is a lot of money.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I feel like we should get a committee and talk about how these funds should be dispersed. So my thinking is we would get different staff, of course, our music directors, both band and choir, of course. But I think a board member too should be a part of that committee. I think we should potentially think about families, parents, students need to be at a voice at the table. So just wondering what the thoughts are. People would agree that this sum of money, I don't think that should be in the hands of just, we need multiple stakeholders at the table.
And the other thing is I don't think the family gave it with the idea that it just sits and rots. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
they gave it so that it gets used,
Right,
you
and
know.
we want to talk about like overtime, like
Yeah.
scholarships every year, how much of that and whatever, but if the board agrees to that, I think we should have two board members if we can, or at least one, be a part of that committee.
I think it would be a good idea.
So it goes back to Terry.
Mel had reached out to me. I'll volunteer.
Okay,
You're asking for volunteers tonight?
you can think about it if you want, but.
Depends upon what the commitment is. Daytime meeting or nighttime meeting? That, I mean,
What would
you know.
Well, I prefer
No,
daytime, like, not evening, it's hard to get teachers and students and everyone else there, so likely, like. In the daytime, probably, maybe, depending on parent, it would be nice to have a couple of parents if they could come. That timing, you know what I mean, like maybe 3:30 or something.
Do we have to set who it is, or could we figure out like, hey, this is
Sure.
when we're doing this
And then
thing
send
and
it out.
two board
But
members
I
just
can
go
do
with
that.
it? And
Well, yeah, and if
Yeah,
someone
couldn't
else
we
wants
just
to
say
go.
two board members?
Yeah.
And I don't think it would be, it would maybe be nice to reach out to Mel or Sue.
Yeah.
To see if they would
Oh,
want to
for
be
sure.
on that committee.
Good
Would be
idea.
there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there should be some kind of recognition, either a plaque or name the music room after him or something like
I
that.
think so
Yeah.
too.
You know what I mean? That's a lot.
It's a lot of money, and I
That's a
do think
lot.
we need to, but the committee could maybe talk about
Right,
that too,
exactly.
right?
It's just an
Yeah.
idea that.
For sure.
Yeah. Right.
The, be in
Yep,
her name, for
Exactly.
sure,
Yep.
yeah,
On
the
musical award after
scholarship.
her, that's
For
given
sure.
out every year or something.
Yeah.
Yep. Right.
So we'll start working on that, process, so that part of the finance too, when you're talking about the difference in revenues, that added to the revenues. Granted, it's can only be used for a specific purpose, right, but that's another way our revenues went up, so outside of a budget that you didn't know about, you know, so. But this is exciting.
Have we ever had a donation that large before?
I have never seen one that big.
Have you, Joel, in your time here?
When Dr. Franzoya passed away, his wife, as part of his estate, donated. It was somewhere around 25,000 into a scholarship fund. And so we award the John Franzoya, the John Franzoya Memorial Scholarship comes from that.
Well, fortunate to have Blattners like Alden done.
Right.
Donating away. This is really good. It's awesome.
It is, absolutely. I'm glad they could come and share their story a little bit too.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Very cool. So next is policy reading, which is just the first and second reading. So for those in the committee, we got the little, super organized, things here, and I look forward to using that as long as I can figure out how to use it. So next is upcoming meeting schedule. So Monday, February 24th is strategic planning committee. Do we remember who that is? I know I'm one of them.
I think it's just.
Oh.
I think there's only one for the
Okay.
that signed up for it. It's on our community.
But another one can go if they want to go to the meeting.
Absolutely. Yep, for sure. Time with that at 6 o'clock.
Then Wednesday, the 26th, noon finance committee, 2 p.m. policy committee. And then March 10th is the next regular board meeting. Anything else to talk about?
Is there any chance we can reschedule that next regular board meeting
For
Will it be March?
the week after?
week after?
What's up right now?
The March 10th, you mean?
Yeah,
To March 17th?
yeah.
We've done that one.
That's St. Patrick's Day. Corn beef and cabbage, great man.
You know, everybody says that, but have you ever had it? It's like not that good.
I love it.
It's
Oh,
not
do you?
bad.
Every year, yeah.
Oh,
What is
I
it?
do the same way.
Oh,
Corn beef
yeah.
and cabbage.
It's not bad.
I like the cabbage, but I just don't know what they do to that beef to make it like that, so it scares me.
All my food love it.
I'm gone that week, but
What about the 24th? Of March?
Would not have concert.
You wouldn't be able to be there, but,
Fifth grade band concert,
oh,
or band concerts, I think.
What about a different day that week?
Tuesday?
I'm gone that whole week.
No, Mark. Oh,
Oh,
what
the
about the
10th.
week of
Oh,
March
geez.
24th? Because she's gone the week of the 17th.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, okay.
So what
Where
about,
are you going? Thanks.
what
I'm
about
only going to Florida, so.
March 25th, maybe that Tuesday?
I mean, otherwise you can have it that week. I'm gone too. It doesn't.
Well, yeah, if it's too much, but it should just try to have everybody here. The 25th work?
25th is my fireman's meeting.
No?
How about the 20th?
No, she's out of town that week. We have two people
Oh,
out
sorry.
of town that week. So I think
The week of the 17th.
if you
And the
did,
week of the third is out.
could we make one exception to do this?
I'm good.
What about Thursday, the 27th? We could try Wednesday, but I know that's tough on you.
That's, yeah.
The 27th is fine for me.
And the 27th work, it's a Thursday.
27th is fine for me.
Good for me.
My calendar's on the wall at home.
You're gonna start bringing that thing from the wall.
So for now,
Next, just a big desk calendar next week, once she comes in with a big old desk calendar.
Going on until middle school.
But tonight was.
I don't know about athletics on that particular night.
there's not much going on.
No, it's still.
Yeah.
In between them.
So we'll tentatively put March 27th. Are we doing 6 p.m.? We'll start with that, and then if there is a conflict, then we'll have to go back. That's okay.
Maybe I want to plan on vacation.
We got
Just
the
do it
first
the
3
3rd,
weeks
the 10th, or
covered.
the 17th. All right. Anything else? All right, can I get a motion to adjourn at 7:49?
So moved.
Thank you. Director Boyd, is that a second?
Yes.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. carries.